guys, Dr. Rob Barrington here with some more nutrition advice. I've been doing some research into the psychology and how it relates to nutrition, and while I was doing this research I came across an interesting study that was been fairly recently published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, and I wanted to cover it because it's quite interesting from a number of perspectives. It's not really my kind of area. It's bordering on psychology in relating to nutrition, and this is something that I'm researching at the moment, but it's not actually really my field of expertise. But I'm very interested in it, and I came across this paper and I wanted to share it because I think it opens up a can of worms. And if you have a look at this paper, I think it's got some wider implications to the society we live in. And from looking at it from a wider perspective, it's actually quite interesting, even from a non-nutritional point of view. The paper was really about trying to change the visual perceptions of individuals with regard to food. There was a group of subjects, and they were healthy subjects, they were normal people, and they were shown some images of food. And some of the food was high-calorie food, and some of the images were low-calorie food. Now, there's not a lot of detail in the paper about what they mean by high-calorie foods, but I'm assuming that the inference within the paper is that these were high-calorie foods that were perhaps low quality. So we're probably talking about very desirable junk-type foods. The low-calorie foods were probably more what I would term low-quality foods in terms of the fact, high-quality foods in terms of the fact that they were probably foods such as beans, whole grains, whole grain bread, generally perceived as high-quality foods, but generally of low calories. So they were showing these images, and some of them were of high-calorie foods, and some of them were of low-calorie foods. They were then asked, as they were going through these foods, I think there were 90 in total, there were 45 high-calorie foods, 45 low-calorie foods. They were then asked to rate these foods on desirability, how much the subject that was being tested desired these foods to eat them at that particular time. And this was done for a large group of individuals, and then the subjects were split into two groups. One group went through the same process again without any changes, so they were then asked to rate these foods based on their desirability to consume them. However, another group was actually the protocol was changed, and this was the treatment group. And what the researchers did is they had a number of positive images, what they called positive images, which were, for example, pictures of a baby smiling, or a butterfly landing on a flower, or they had also a couple smiling. They were classed as positive images. They had a number of negative images as well, and these were things like a cockroach or a broken bone. They also had, what else did they have? They had a burn on a skin, so a burn wound on a skin, and these were available from a database. It was a database of these types of images that are used by researchers. So these weren't images that they created themselves. They got these from a well used database of known negative and known positive images that have these effects on the human brain. And what they did is they inserted negative images, so for example an image of a cockroach, just before they showed the high calorie food, and they inserted positive pictures, so for example the baby smiling, just before they showed the image of the low calorie food. But very cleverly they only showed the image for about 20 milliseconds. And this is beyond the ability of a human to perceive the image. So in other words, the images were shown, but the subjects couldn't actually see the images. These images entered the subconscious, but they weren't consciously viewed by the subjects. Now, this was checked by the researchers because the subjects were asked if they could see these images, and none of them were able to recall what the images were. Some of the subjects claimed that they could see images, but they couldn't actually recall what they were, and therefore it was certain to the researchers that these images were being shown, but they weren't actually being picked up consciously by the subjects. When they looked at the results, what they found is that those the treatment group, those that were shown the negative imagery with the high calorie food, they actually had a decrease. They actually showed that there was a decrease in the desirability of that high quality food when a negative image was inserted into the imagery of that food for 20 milliseconds. So what effectively they were saying was that if you insert this negative imagery before you show a picture of a desirable item of food, the desirability of that food decreases. They didn't find that the positive imagery increased the desirability of the low calorie food, but they did find, as I say, that the negative imagery decreased the desirability of the high calorie food. And that's not all. They also found some other things. What they found was that not only was the desirability of the high calorie foods that they were shown with this negative imagery decreased, they also found that other highly desirable what we call highly desirable high calorie foods, also the desirability also decreased. So this was a generalized effect. Once they'd inserted these negative images into the subconscious of these subjects, what they actually found was that this was a generalized effect. These images were not related specifically to the images that they were shown with the negative image. They were actually general. It was a general effect in the brain. So all high calorie food then became less desirable. And in addition, what they did is they tested the subjects a number of days later, and they found that this decrease in the desirability of the food was still present. In other words, this was a long-lasting effect. They'd actually affected the subconscious of these subjects, and it wasn't something that was in the short term, because I think it was 3 to 5 days later they were retested, and they still had this decrease in the desirability of this high-calorie food. Now, obviously, if you read the paper, and I will put the link to the paper in the comments box below this video, the researchers concluded that this was perhaps a useful tool in being able to decrease the desirability of high-calorie foods, and therefore may have an ability to prevent obesity and treat those people who were obese. Now that's quite interesting, and I suppose that conclusion does follow with the data that was in this study. But I thought that this had a wider implication, because it shows something that I've suspected for a long time, and that's that you're able to affect people's food choices subconsciously, and I've anecdotally, and I don't think there's really much published work on this, but anecdotally, if you look at the mainstream media, you look at advertising, you look at magazines, you look at movies, you look at music, there is this subliminal subconscious placing of symbols, of products that is really there to increase the desirability of those products. Now, I'm obviously not an expert on advertising in general, but I always look out for food, because I'm interested in nutrition, and I've suspected for some time that low quality foods that are what I would consider bad for us, high calorie foods, have this kind of this subliminal imagery surrounding them that is used very cleverly by the companies that create these foods in order to be able to get us to consume more of them. And this shows to me that the degree to which they can take this is to actually show, even if they show an image for a fraction of a second, 20 milliseconds is enough to change the desirability of a food. Now, another interesting thing about this study was that they used the positive imagery to be able to with the low calorie foods, and they used the negative imagery to decrease the desirability of the high calorie foods. But what they didn't do is use positive imagery with the high calorie foods to see if that increased the desirability. I'm suspicious of why they didn't do that, possibly because I suspect that if you did that, what would happen is you'd find the desirability of that food actually increased. And I think this is probably what advertising companies and food companies have known for some time, and this is why I've suspected for some time that adverts contain many subliminal messages. These adverts are not created by accident. They're very, 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 very well thought out. Many of them. Most people see them as just, on the basic level of a visual, advertisement of a food. But the the companies that run these adverts, the food companies, are very clever with the way they place foods and the messages that they put. Many of the messages we don't pick up consciously, we actually pick them up subconsciously. And this study shows that once they're in our subconscious, even if we haven't seen and visually perceived something that's within the advert, it stays within our subconscious at least for, in this case of this study, at least 5 days. This is, obviously TV is going to be, a prime suspect for this kind of activity. There are many food adverts on television, but on a lower level, perhaps they also use this in magazines. Certainly in films, I've noticed that there are many placements for food companies and fast food restaurants appearing in films. They're not appearing by accident. They're placement there for particular reasons, to associate particular imagery with that food. And also sponsorship of sports events as well. This is a very common way of subliminally creating a particular belief system in an individual by associating a particular food with a sports event. What I believe they're trying to do is, and other people have commented on this as well, is they are trying to associate exercise with a healthy lifestyle, suggesting that if you exercise, if you're active, if you're sporting, it doesn't matter what food you eat because it's an energy balance situation, and as long as you eat, what they call a balanced diet, and you don't overeat one particular type of food, it's the amount of food you eat, not the type, not the types of foods that you eat. And I think that's what they're trying to do, and they're trying to claim that exercise is what will keep you thin, trying to take the emphasis off the fact that it's actually the low quality foods full of fructose, full of trans fats, that what actually causes obesity through metabolic dysfunction. If they can take the highlight off their foods and place them, place the responsibility of weight maintenance on the individual, and saying, look, all you've got to do if you want to maintain your weight is do more exercise, so we'll sponsor these sports events to promote this kind of healthy living, healthy lifestyle. If they can take the heat off themselves and actually make people think that it's actually the amount of exercise they do and this energy balance, as long as I don't overeat and as long as I exercise I won't gain fat. The reality of the situation is it's their low quality foods and metabolic poisons, particularly fructose in soft drinks, fruit drinks, trans fats as well. All of these low quality foods contain these metabolic poisons. They damage our metabolic pathways, and that's what causes obesity, which is a disease. It's a disease of metabolism. It is not simply an energy imbalance, and that's, I think, what they're trying to do with sport. But they are very clever. They're very slippery, and you have to keep your eye on them. So I thought this was interesting. I just wanted to throw it out there as for the wider picture. I know this isn't particularly my area. I'm really just a nutritionist, and I look at the biochemistry and the metabolic aspects. But sometimes the psychology of this is more interesting than the actual nutrition. And in this case, I think this nicely illustrates, this study, if you have a read of it, it nicely illustrates that whether they are doing this or not, is not the question. The question is that they could do this. It would be very easy for them to use this kind of subliminal, subconscious level advertising to be able to change people's behavior. It is possible. This paper proves that, and therefore, from there we can, it's interesting to watch some of these adverts and wonder what's actually going on, because if they are using these very short images to be able to change people's behavior, that would be against somebody's free will. Really, you're effectively brainwashing somebody, and that is quite a nefarious act, I would suggest. So I thought that was interesting. If you've got any comments on this type of thing, on this video or anything that I've mentioned, please leave them in the comments box below, and I'll get back to you soon with another video. And in the meantime, please take care.